Arrived at the time for tonight's keynote speech, presented by Emeritus Professor Rosalind Croucher, AM. Professor Croucher was appointed as President of the Australian Human Rights Commission in July of 2017, and after 7.5 years as President of the Australian Law Reform Commission. In 2014, she was acknowledged for her contribution to public policy as one of Australia's 100 Women of Influence, and received the Australian Women Lawyers Award for her leadership and commitment to the support and advancement of women in the legal profession. In the Australia Day Honours List in 2015, Professor Croucher was made a member of the Order of Australia. In 2016, Macquarie University conferred on her the title of Emeritus Professor, and in 2018, NSW conferred on her an honorary degree of Doctor of Laws. Professor Rosalind Croucher.
Assalamu alaikum, may peace be unto you. It's customary when giving a keynote to say thank you and acknowledge all of the relevant people, but given that there are so many distinguished guests in the room, each of which has been beautifully acknowledged, I think I will just say all of the above. And thank you, Jeremy, particularly, and Cousin Ahmet, for acknowledging all of the wonderful guests. So thank you for those acknowledgements and all of the above and all of those who come after. Cousin Ahmet, you dub us all in that lovely description of Affinity by the title of Cousin. And I think that expresses so much the feeling that is in the room. You also referred to the poet Rumi. And the poet Rumi and that wonderful statement that is on the website that to me was going to frame my talk in many ways. And I have to say, coming onto the stage after those wonderful speeches, I think I'm up to this is the fourth keynote I think you're getting this evening. You did a beautiful job, an absolutely beautiful job. But the Affinity Intercultural Foundation homepage has a beautiful quote from the 13th century Persian poet and Islamic scholar Jalal al-Din Muhammad Rumi, just known as Rumi to everyone these days. There is a window from one heart to another heart. This to me expresses the idea that I wanted to speak to in my talk this evening, which is the idea of listening with your heart. There is indeed a window from one heart to another. I also want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I'm speaking, on which we're eating tonight, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and elders past, present, and especially the emerging ones, the children and grandchildren of our Indigenous people, and to acknowledge any Indigenous guests who are attending in Affinity this evening. I wanted to reflect on the idea of walking together in the spirit of understanding and dialogue and what that means. And it is captured to me in that whole idea of listening with our hearts. I want to tell you a story that has stayed with me. It is a tale of a Cambodian taxi driver. It happened in 1989, 33 years ago. I don't even know the driver's name. I will call him Ponlik, a Cambodian name which means strength and endurance. I was catching a plane to the airport and was stuck in a traffic jam. I had a plane to catch to present a seminar somewhere in New South Wales. Important new wills legislation had just been passed, and I was doing continuing legal education presentations all around the state, as this was then my area of academic expertise. I am an excessively, even obsessively punctual person, and here I was really stuck. I could see the hands on my watch going round and round before my eyes. To To allay the sick feeling in my stomach, I turned to Ponleek and asked him his story. Something my dear late mother always did, and so I followed her example. I started to listen from my heart. This is Ponleek's story. Cambodia lies to the north of Malaysia and is bordered by Vietnam to the east, Thailand to the west, and Laos to the north. Ponleek's family had been small business people in Phnom Penh, Cambodia's capital city. They ran a little shop. To the Khmer Rouge, the extreme communist regime that ruled the country from 1975 to 1979, Ponleek's family were capitalists. As the Khmer Rouge worked to create a new society, capitalists were the enemy, and families and religion were rivals in loyalty to the state. An estimated 1.5 million people in a population of only 7 million people were killed. Ponleek was 14 at the time. His family, the little family of shop owners, and many others, were put on trucks and driven to the country. Ponleek's parents pushed him and another boy out of the truck. "Run away," they said. He never saw his family again. Their graves, as undoubtedly they are dead, are not marked, nor will ever be known. They lie with so many of their countrymen and women in the mass graves of the killing fields. The boys hid in trees and fields and eventually found their way to a refugee camp on the Vietnamese border. It was there Ponleek befriended an Australian soldier, and through the support of that soldier, Ponleek came to Australia. In the Cambodian community in Sydney, he found love, marrying a woman who had also escaped. He changed my whole perspective on life, making my concerns about being late seem utterly trivial. How many of you here today, or your families, have stories to tell like these? And what would you do? What would I do if I ended up in a position like Ponleek? If instead of sitting here breaking our fast, we were fleeing for our lives? On occasions like this evening, it is about seeing what joins us as part of humanity. This is true affinity. That idea of listening with your heart, the window from one heart to another. And there have been moments of great affinity shown in recent years. During the bushfires of the summer of 2019 to 20, during the floods of past months, and during the lockdowns we have all endured as part of the public health measures in response to COVID-19. There have been moments when great affinity was sorely needed. A particular example was in the wake of reactions to the lone gunman of the Lint Cafe siege just down the road in Martin Place. It sparked concerns about anti-Muslim attacks in its wake. One evening, a young woman was sitting on a train and quietly removing her hijab before she got off the train. She was sitting next to another woman, Rachel Jacobs. Rachel wrote on her Facebook page what she then did. I ran after her at the train station. I said, "Put it back on, I'll walk with you." She started to cry, Rachel said, and hugged me for about a minute, then walked off alone. This inspired a movement under the hashtag I'll ride with you. There were 40,000 tweets using this hashtag in 2 hours, 150,000 in 4. In our own work, the Human Rights Commission is strongly committed to addressing stereotypes and discrimination affecting Muslim communities. For example, my colleague, I won't say cousin, but my colleague, Race Discrimination Commissioner Chin Tan, who is undoubtedly a cousin of yours, Ahmet, recently released a report entitled Sharing the Stories of Australian Muslims. This report gave Australian Muslims an opportunity to share their stories of successful community initiatives and ideas about how they can be supported to fully enjoy their human rights. Muslim consultees identified important solutions. These include ensuring effective engagement with the Muslim community to drive policy action, providing early interfaith education and public awareness education, and introducing robust legislative protection against Islamophobia and anti-Muslim hate. Each year, the Human Rights Commission honours people in our Human Rights Awards. At the end of 2020, we knew that we could not do it in the same way as past years, with a lunch in a room full of people. So we did it differently. We asked for nominations of human rights heroes. One of the heroes for 2020 was the group Sikh Volunteers Australia. Sikh Volunteers started the year by expanding their service, which provides free meals to people experiencing homelessness in Melbourne, to travel hundreds of kilometres delivering free meals for bushfire-stricken communities in regional Victoria. And since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, they have also prepared and delivered 400 meals a day to people in need across Melbourne, totalling an astonishing almost 130,000 free meals as of the 26th of November last year. In 2021, we had only 3 categories, including an award for a community human rights champion. This was awarded to Plate It Forward. We have a food theme going here. Plate It Forward launched in July 2020 as an immediate solution during the COVID pandemic. This has evolved into long-term programs to support marginalised communities, and they've proudly donated over 120,000 meals, delivered over 6,500 hours of training, and employed 25 community members. And they've also rescued 15 tonnes of food destined for landfill. These are wonderful examples of walking together in the spirit of understanding and dialogue. And they have a focus on food. Fasting, as Ahmet told us, is a practice in a number of religions. Several Christian denominations observe fasting practices like the period of Lent. Yom Kippur in Judaism are noted examples. From my Muslim friends, I have come to appreciate how Iftar is celebrated and how each family has its own distinct and special ways of celebrating, how fasting and breaking the fast together brings families, brings people together. My former colleague, the former Human Rights Commissioner, prior to Lorraine Finlay, now Professor Ed Santo, told me about some of the Ramadan memes out there. It is extraordinary what Google will turn up. Like the one of the koala with gum leaves in its mouth saying, "What do you mean it's not Iftar time yet?" Or, in honour of our Canadian guests in the room, Donald Sutherland, one of my favourite actors, saying, "Ramadan Kareem, let the Hunger Games begin." What religious periods of fasting require us to do is to refocus, to appreciate each other and good things like food and other things that are avoided, at least during the daytime of the month of Ramadan. Sharing the joy of religious traditions that now make up our wonderfully diverse Australian community is part of what makes Australia a land of rich possibility for affinity. acknowledging our differences and listening with our hearts brings us closer together. There is indeed a window from one heart to another heart. Thank you, Cousin Ahmet, and all your wonderful helpers for tonight. Ramadan Mubarak.